Musical Talk, the UK independent musical theatre podcast.
Welcome to Musical Talk. My name is Nick Hudson. Hello. I am delighted to be joined by a troupe of very, very young, talented performers and writers who are currently laughing at me to discuss their very interesting and incredibly moving at some parts production, Operation Mincemeat. We did talk about it on Musical Talk when it played at the Riverside Studios in Hammersmith, but now it is making its way further into the West End, where it rightly belongs. We'll just go around the virtual Zoom room so we can say who we are. Shall we start with Felix, if you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Felix Hagan. I'm one of the writers of Operation Mincemeat, or Mincemeat as I call it, to save time.
That was really good time saving.
So much time.
Hi, I'm Tash. I'm one of the writers, and I also play a part in the musical You and Montague.
I'm Zoe. I'm also one of the writers, and I play Bevan in the show.
And I'm David, the fourth and best, some might say, member of Spitlick. And I play Charles Chumley in the show.
Thank you all for coming on Musical Talk. It's obviously a very exciting time for you, having done the incredibly successful run at the Riverside Studios. Tell us how you got to that point, and then we'll move on to where you are now.
Oh, what a tale. So we've been writing the show. We've started thinking about writing the show in 2017. Me and Zoe and David, that's the guy, we're in a comedy troupe together for a number of years and started adding in more and more elements of music. We just couldn't help ourselves into our shows. And then I was also in a band, a glam punk band with Felix. So we joined forces and decided that how hard can writing a musical be? Famous last words. So yeah, we cooked up, we came across this amazing true spy story of Operation Mincemeat, a spy caper set in World War II, where it's throwing corpses in the sea and tricking Hitler and all these crazy things. And so we did our first run. We managed to convince a gorgeous theatre, the New Diorama, who take chances on young theatre makers all the time, to give us a 5-week run. I think we had maybe one song in the bag by that point. We're like, see, we've got one song. It's easy. We did 5 weeks there in 2019, and then we had lots of plans that were unfortunately kiboshed totally by a little thing we like to call the pandemic. We don't need to mention it. And since then we've been at Southwark Playhouse, and as you said earlier, last year we did a 3-month run at the Riverside Studios in Hammersmith. So we're all very excited and tired, and that's where you meet us here today.
Yes. Did you find that I don't want to say the L word, but the L word that we all know what I mean, did it let you sit down and work on the piece more, or did you just leave it? How did you make use of that situation?
Took me a minute to figure out which. I thought you meant love.
I just got there.
I thought you meant the TV show with the lesbians from America. I was like, what?
Well, take it in any direction you want.
Great influences. I actually think lockdown, it massively did actually shape the show, didn't it? We were kind of on a bit of a roller coaster of, we had runs planned and we had performances planned, but in a way, actually hitting pause gave us a chance to really kind of dig into the material, kind of feel like we had the space to really pull it apart and stick it back together again. But also the experience that everybody went through globally, I feel like also influenced our telling of the story. The elements that we put in, I think it made us, want to explore the kind of more sentimental areas of the story about World War II that we kind of, I guess, previously as comedy writers, we've been a bit more like tentative about, and sort of injected a bit more heart into the story during that period.
Because the bit that I remember, and I'm sure you know which bit I'm going to talk about, is there's a beautiful, it's been a while since I've seen the show, so you'll forgive me, it's a letter or a phone call or something like that. Is that the kind of thing you mean, Zoe?
That actually, so the song you're talking about is called Dear Bill, and it's a love letter. It's a woman, female character, actually played by a man in her sort of mid-40s, who's singing this kind of letter to somebody who is out fighting in the war. That actually is one of the elements of the show that was in there from the beginning, actually, and that was really important to us, and kind of hasn't changed almost a note or a word since 2019. It was always what we used to talk about. It was a kind of like rug pulling moment of, you know, the feels amongst the kind of comedy and the fun. It kind of comes as a bit of a surprise to the audience, but I think that's where the kind of power of it is. But actually, it's more been in the kind of the how we set up the show, but particularly how we close the show, that I think really changed. We sort of on a reflex had a big silly comedy ending in the first iteration of it. We just went for the kind of biggest, silliest thing we could find, and actually that time of, you know, we all went through, it kind of made us go, actually what we need to end on is thinking about the not the comedy characters that we've kind of seen throughout this caper, and actually the real people that were out there and were fighting the war and have been through hard times, and kind of, yeah, it's all about kind of being in it together and surviving and making it through.
I think as well, like we were struggling for what lockdown did. We were struggling a bit with the character that we talked about earlier, Hester, who sings Dear Bill. There's she and the other female character, Jean. We were struggling with their story in Act 2 in terms of at some point in the story, one of them gets basically booted off the mission, and it's very, you know, a difficult moment for her. And we've done a few different versions of how they sort of resolve that and how they just like explore that. And actually being in lockdown, it sounds really weird, but like that feeling that we all experienced of just not being able to be any use to anyone, and being like, we can't help. We're just trapped in our houses and we can't do anything. And like everyone's on their own Facebook group being like, can I deliver medicine to a neighbor? Can I do? And like, we'd never really been struck by the reality of that. And I think that ended up, you know, we started talking about that, and that has ended up being one of the songs in Act 2 is called Useful. And it's basically explores the feeling of like, yes, it's horrible to be kicked out of a gang that you are part of, but actually at the root of it, it's that frustration of being like, if I can't do this, if I can't help, then what am I doing? Like, I have no, we're so powerless in those moments. And we all felt that, you know, within the pandemic, and and it linked us a lot back to how people must have felt during that time when all particularly women could just do is sit and wait. And the realities of, if you are suddenly part of a group that feel like you're doing something and then you're not part of that anymore, how do you deal with that? And so yeah, that it really helped us kind of solidify that part of the story, and it's become one of like certainly my favorite bits of the show now. To kind of, it feels honest in a way that it didn't before the pandemic hit.
And also it's something the audience will be able to relate with as well. They become, you know, a key character at that point. And congratulations to you all, because you've done something which is the impossible, which has made something a musical that really shouldn't be a musical. It's a bit like, and I presume Mel Brooks has been chucked around a lot with kind of the producers and Springtime for Hitler and things like that. So tell us about how you looked at that and thought, well, what can we, because there is the film of Operation Mincemeat as well, which I haven't seen, because I much rather enjoy the musical, because I prefer musicals. So
that's what we like to hear.
Yeah,
Nick. You're our kind of people.
So how did you make it a musical? Was it always going to be satirical and review like, or was it ever going to be like a let's do it as a, because it was a comedy first for you, wasn't it?
I think because our background is comedy, right? Yeah. Sorry, Dave, you go.
Yeah, background's comedy, and so we anything we write will always by its very nature just end up being comedy, because that's what we write and that's how we think.
Also, dark comedy particularly, we bend towards dark comedy anyway. So the idea of doing something about a big Nazi, number, for example, is very appealing to us.
And then music-wise, we never set out to. We weren't like, it's going to be a jazz musical, it's going to be a rock musical. We approached it in the sense of, what is the best, looking at the moments of the story and then being like, what is the best and also funniest version of presentation of this moment? And then what would that sound like? And so that's why it's quite a broad range of different musical styles, where they range from like 40s jazz to modern like synth pop bangers, and each song represents our idea of the best telling of that moment of the story, without the shackles of like, but it's got to all sound exactly the same. We were quite musically free in that sense.
Yes,
and also in terms of the comedy of it, like it was just so obviously a comedy to us. I don't know, like we read this story and it was like, all we've fed our whole lives, particularly, in Britain, is, oh, the war, when boys were men and men were at the war. And like, it's very serious, it's very important. And, it really shows Britain as its best, blah, blah, blah. And then we read this story of these like idiots careering around, stealing corpses and trying on different, versions of underwear and lying and doing illegal activity whilst having the best time of their lives. And I just kind of felt like we can do a big piss take, like, and also that's what our politicians are doing now still. Yeah. It's the same. And I think we were very electrified by being like, this is the version of the war that we are interested in telling. It's the version where the people in charge are just as ludicrous as anyone else, and like and glorifying this great, everyone was behaving themselves and it was the best time of their lives, etc. is ripe for being just torn apart. And
you kind of expect sort of Dad's Army to come out at some point. It's got that sort of kind of same. The British love laughing at themselves, which is why I think this show is such, and will continue to be such a success. It's so look at what we did. We achieved all this, but we had a bit of fun on the way, and we're not idiots, but we all make mistakes. We are, yes.
In a lovely way, we are.
Yeah.
And I have to say, going back to the kind of the bold music choices you make, the opening of Act 2 will stick in my mind for a very, very long time, and I won't reveal why. But listener, if you do go and see it, be prepared to be slapped over the face many times. So now you find yourself, you've chucked out a short-running show in the Fortune Theatre, and now you're going to overtake that show and run for a further 32 years, which would be very exciting. Tell us what that process has been like.
I mean, it's kind of a dream come true. It's been it's humbling to have been the thing that follows the Woman in Black. That's quite a big mantle to be passed on. But the exciting thing about the Fortune Theatre is that it's not a huge rolling arena of a space. It's actually a very for a West End show, a West End stage, a very intimate space when there's not really a bad seat in the house. And the audience, no matter where they are, is pretty close to the stage. So it feels something that is kind of a logical step for the show. But obviously it comes with then you're suddenly on a platform with all these other shows. You've kind of got to compete. But we are sticking strong to what we love about the show. We're not going to change it just for the sake of it moving to the West End and to make it like another West End show because West End shows have to do X, Y, Z. We don't think that's true. We think our show should do what it wants. And then just the kind of growth of the machine that comes with, usually in a fringe show level, it's just the 4 people that make it. If we want to do anything, we have to decide to do it. We have to go to that meeting. We have to take the phone call.
You have to go to B&Q and get the bucket and bring it to the thing and wipe the thing, paint the thing.
And now there's someone else to go get the bucket, which at the very least...
the loss of the bucket job is really, that's the big one for us.
But no, it's great. It's humbling. And, it's exciting and, let's be honest, a bit terrifying because the biggest thing any of us have
You seem to be following a wonderful tradition that I've noticed with things like, and not drawing comparisons at all, but just the path it took with Six, for example, and also the Mischief Theatre Company. We are seeing these kind of wonderful success stories of little shows that just somehow win the hearts of audiences and just make a huge name for themselves, which is wonderful. And it's so nice that we have another show like that to look forward to going into the Fortune. Where are you now? Not literally, but where are you? What stage are you looking at songs and lyrics and thinking, can we change this because of what's happened in the news? Or is it just, or is it frozen, that's it, you're done? But you also have a very long preview period, which is interesting.
Yes, because we just love to change stuff.
Change it.
I like
that. No, that's terrible.
I think partly because it's comedy, so it's always feeling like it can always be cranked up, but also we're always looking to kind of just improve and find that extra 10%, 5%, 2% that we can make it better. Also because a certain person fell off his bike last summer during a
Thank you, David.
So we kind of we lost a bit of time. Instead of doing the changes that we'd kind of been wanting to make, we instead had to frantically teach another actor an entire musical in about 3 days. So we're really, really excited that the preview period is there so that we can make some of those. None of them are drastic changes. It's all about kind of cranking up what's already there and kind of just galvanizing and making it the best version, but doing it in front of an audience, as we've always done. We've always developed as we've gone in front of an audience to kind of road test stuff. So we're not making it in a silo. We're not making jokes just for ourselves. Like we're testing stuff. We're changing it every night. If it's not landing, we're improving it. And yeah, we're excited to have the audience along with us for that hopefully final stage of development before we
we're so excited to finish it. Oh my gosh.
Finish it on the 9th of May. It should be done, we really hope.
And was the creation process of this show, I imagine it to be very much, if I say like the Joan Littlewood style, for example, of Oh What a Lovely War, where you just improvised in a room and came up with a concept, or did you sit down at tables or on Zoom or whatever and write it and then took it into a rehearsal room?
We love sitting down.
We're really sitting down.
Old age.
That's been the one thing about doing this musical is it's far too little sitting down.
No, we would get in a room and bring different bits. I love this bit of the story and I love this bit, and we'd plot out the main beats of what we thought the arc might need to be, and then we'd zero in on each moment, and then we'd start talking. We'd basically be like, what is the like nubbin of this, and nubbin, or like what's the kernel of this moment that we really want to play with, and what's the game that we want to play on stage. So that's thinking staging wise, but then also music and lyrics, like what's the kind of hook of this chorus? What's the ultimate thing we're trying to say here? And until we found that, we couldn't really. I mean, we'd kind of bounce ideas around, but we weren't getting up and just devising it as we went. It would be a lot of table work in the first instance, and then someone would take it away and write a bit more and bring it back, and we'd be like, I love this bit, change that there.
Yeah, we're not very improvisy, I'd say, until we get to performance, and then all bets are off.
And who is this is my world of things now. Who is the composer, or is it all of you?
Well, it's all of us,
right?
And then there's sort of varying degree. Basically, we all do all the jobs, and there's sort of shades in between that as to who there's more towards like book writing, melody writing, lyric writing, and then like orchestration. I would say, Felix, it's fair to say that you are the most orchestratey of us, and you are in charge of orchestrating most of our demos and stuff. And as well
done, Felix. It sounded amazing.
Thank you.
But I think Dave,
in terms of melodies and top lines and lyrics and stuff, it's kind of a grab bag, isn't it? We don't really have an official process, for better or worse.
And then some songs have been primarily written by more than one or two people. Some have been a hodgepodge of all of us. Some have come poured out of in a voice note from someone's brain, just the melody, and the rest of us have kind of written to that. So each song has actually been written very differently. But it's kind of a sliding scale of where people sit in terms of like the orchestration, the music. But we do all have a hand in all of it, really, which is why it's so inefficient.
So it's why it's taken 5 years.
But it's also that's amazing, because it sounds like one person, and I mean this in the politest way possible. It sounds like it's one person's voice, which is great, because it means you are all on the same page when it comes to thinking about the show you're working on.
Well, I think also in some ways it makes more sense, because like I think it's entirely bizarre to us that you would have a show where one person would write what the character says whilst they're singing, and another person would write what they're saying when they're talking. This split of like sort of book and music and lyrics to us feels mental, because it's all the same people and they're all just telling a story, and it should, and how do you decide what point actually this story could be told much better if it was musical, but then if you already got the script and blah blah. So I think although it's sort of technically is unorthodox insofar as tradition, for us it feels much more like the sensible way of doing things, because things that aren't divided up into what they sound like, because I think you do get musicals where tone changes hugely between book and music, and they're not very successful in my opinion, because it should sound the same the whole way through.
So you're in the show. If there is a cast change, how will that feel to sit back and watch people take on what you've done?
You know our thoughts on sitting.
Cannot wait. Absolutely cannot wait.
I mean, it was as the one of the. I mean, Felix gets the joy of watching the show as much as he wants. I don't know how much of a joy he takes in that. But that experience happened to me last summer in a slightly less planned way than we'd hoped, and it was simultaneously very difficult to, extrapolate your own sense of. That's not quite how that part should be played, because it's never been played by anyone else, so it just feels like but of course there are ever so slightly different versions of Chumley to be played for Infinity, right? But what is lovely is, as a writer, to be able to sit back and actually watch it all and experience as an audience member, like, oh wow, this is what it all feels like, the sum total of the whole show. When it washes over you, until you sit and watch that, you have no sense of what it's like from being inside. It's really, it gave me a completely different perspective on the show. But it was hard to take myself out of being on the stage. It took me like about, 3 weeks of watching the show every single night before I could actually just watch it without just seeing how it was different to what I was expecting, if that makes sense.
And David, how did that feel when you went back to play the role? Had you made any changes, whether subconsciously or consciously, watching and inhaling the show, if you will?
It actually made me realize that that you can only ever focus on X amount at any given point as the audience member. So you're knowing where the focus of each millisecond of the show needs to go actually releases you a bit as an actor to be like, well, actually, I'm not the main focus here, so I don't need to be worrying too much about exactly what my moment is right now. Not that you're not doing work, but just not worrying too much about kind of over-egging the pudding, just learning when to step back and when you're kind of...
It's not all about you, Dave. That's the thing.
Exactly. But yeah, and then obviously getting back on the horse of Chumley was a lovely thing to do, but it was weird then going back into it and being like, oh, this is what they're watching. It's kind of a double vision, if that makes sense, with seeing it from outside and inside at the same time.
We're very excited to have understudies and have people. We can't wait. And if they manage to get any extra laughs out of it, I will be stealing every single one. So
yeah, that's the other thing. That's a great way. I'll just nick that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And are there any thoughts of a potential album? Because I would love to hear the songs again in a proper listening environment, not a theatre, if that makes sense.
Oh, we would on it. We really want that as well. That's all we want.
Good.
There's no official news as yet, but that is something that we very much want to happen. So as much as you love to listen to it, we would also love to listen to
yes.
it.
I think our focus is on finishing the damn thing, and then it's hard to record it until that's happened.
Yeah.
But rest assured, it is on our list of things that we're desperate to make happen as soon as we possibly can.
It's odd though, because when a show announces, a brand new musical coming, like Lloyd Webber, for example, brand new musical coming to the West End. Oh, we've done the cast album. I just happened to do it as a concept album at Abbey Road, and it's like, well, that album bears no resemblance to the show that we've seen. So it's good that you want to get the chicken done first and then do the egg, if you will. So what are you changing?
Come find out.
It's hard to say. Yeah, anything, everything, until you get into the rehearsal room, because of Dave's unfortunate collarbone incident last time round, we really thought we'd have the time to have all this focus on things that we wanted to improve in the show, and we didn't have it at all. And so we can go in with a list of things like, oh, we'd like to improve this moment, this kind of little section feels like it could be boosted, but until we are in the room and doing it, which was what we have for this amazing rehearsal period, and then we have these previews, it's hard to really specify. There are a couple of really obvious small things that we know we want to change, but I don't think they'll be particularly interesting to hear about. But yeah, I think we're just really desperate to kind of just make everything as good as it can be. I think what part of it was quite hard at the Riverside going into that rehearsal period being like, great, we're really going to supercharge it and it's going to be exactly what we want it to be, and then kind of being like, oh, we can't actually do that now. We have to just kind of put it on, even though we were super proud of where it is. As makers, obviously, all you want to do once you get a little idea in your head to be like, oh, but if we could just do this, it would be so much better. So we're just really excited to finally scratch that itch over a series of weeks.
And how different is the Riverside space compared to the Fortune space? Is it a different I think the Fortune is a smaller stage, I would think, is it?
Yeah, I think actually the Riverside was quite vast. And if anything, we were kind of working quite hard to sort of, again, retain that intimacy that is at the heart of the show, and to retain that kind of sense of like, you're with this, bunch of scrappy guys just pulling off the impossible. But actually, if you, drop them in this kind of enormous stage, we were like, no, it's small, come closer. So actually, we're delighted really that the Fortune is a real gift of a space. I think is, we would feel a bit lost trying to fill an enormous house, and actually what it means is that there's not a bad seat in that entire audience. Everybody's going to get the best kind of experience of the show. They're going to be right there with us, which for comedy as well as for all the musical stuff is so essential. So yeah, we're really, it feels like the perfect home for the show, really.
And I think that in terms of the Riverside, in what was interesting from being outside watching and then inside doing the show, that space was built as a TV studio. So it is built for sound to die. Like, they don't want the sound to travel. And so what was interesting, that it wasn't as much a problem as an audience member. You could hear the show, it was coming at you, and you could hear everyone around you having a great time. But what was really interesting is on stage, you could only really see, and then about the first 3 rows, and then you couldn't hear anything beyond that. So people would be genuinely having a great time, like laughing their asses off. And I'd get a text at the interval from people being like, they hate it. I was like, what are you talking about? And I was like,
the first few shows, we were like, oh, we've killed it. We've absolutely, what's happened? We've really
show's gone wrong.
So having a space where you will be able to feel like the audience are close and be able to hear them actually enjoying the show, I think will just give it all that energy that we love and that life is about.
I guess for those people who don't know, I guess we should probably give a brief plot synopsis of the show and the true story that this is based on. We haven't yet really touched on that.
Nah, boring. So yeah, it's based on a secret MI5 mission that took place during World War II, whereby the Allies had a huge problem in that they needed to invade mainland Europe, but Hitler was bloody everywhere, and there was just no good way to do it. And so they needed a way to kind of make the Germans go somewhere else, even though there was no reason for them to do it. And so, yeah, Churchill got a bunch of his weirdest thinkers. He called them the corkscrew thinkers, including Ian Fleming, people like that, to try and come up with crazy ideas that they could use to hoodwink Hitler and send his troops somewhere stupid. And it happened to be that a sort of nerdy scientist called Charles Chumley, played by our collar broker David, came up with this idea that they could find a body, dress it as a pilot, fill his pockets with plans that were like, hey, we've decided to go somewhere else, Hitler. Oh, hope you don't see this. That would be super annoying. Throw him in the sea, send him to Spain, hope that somehow German spies would get the body, hope that they would then send it all the way to Hitler, that he would be so convinced by this stupid document that didn't mean anything, that he would move thousands and thousands of men away from where they definitely needed to be. And it all happened, and it shouldn't have. It was just ridiculous. And so, yeah, it's a story of these posh MI5 boys, this small group of people, 5 people, including Chumley and Montague, who I play, trying their best to create an entire man from scratch, and his birth records and what he wore and who he lived with, and he had a fictionalized fiance. They had to make these documents and everything around him be so accurate and precise that no matter how much digging the Germans did, they would not find a flaw in the plan, because if they did find it out, it would completely make clear that they were in the exact right place and should not move no matter what. So yeah, it's the story of that really, and the people involved in that, and what they did, and how it happened.
And why do you think it plays well to audiences in 2023/2022/ however long you've been doing this performance?
For the billion years. Yeah, I mean, I think there's always the question of like our own understanding of our own history, and there's been a rise around the world, also in Britain, I'd say, of kind of this slightly more nationalistic thinking, and thinking back to how things used to be back in the 40s and 50s, and everything was better then. And I think this is a take on being like, well, it wasn't quite like that. And it's a revisionist history of our own myth that we tell ourselves of how the war was run. And then increasingly, and some would say terrifyingly, the show has got more relevant as the people at the top of our actual government seem to be kind of riding roughshod over morals and laws and also at the same time looking at them having a wonderful time getting drunk and whatever and having parties during lockdown and not really caring about the other side of the coin. And we point towards that, the kind of the idiocy at the top of the establishment and the privilege that these people have and the fun that they seem to be having within that. That all speaks to modern day stuff. And then the Nazis are back. I don't know if you've noticed. So any show that reminds us that they're not a good thing to be having back is always quite good. Anything else?
I think maybe it's just, maybe this might be right, but like for me, I think as a people, maybe as a globe, we feel quite powerless at the moment. I think everyone is looking for stories of where small teams and like small things can make a big impact. And I think maybe certainly for us, this idea of this story of this small group of people doing this ridiculous, insane thing and in the hope that it might make a little bit of difference really spoke to us, and I think speaks to audiences to kind of go, you know, bravery and integrity, well, not integrity, the opposite of integrity, but innovation and having crazy ideas and playing them out. We can, those things exist, and those missions and those adventures sometimes do come off. And I feel like it's, even though we take the piss out of the government and we take the piss out of the men who made this happen, there's something in the fact that, you know, sometimes crazy plans do come off, and that speaks to nice things.
And I'll leave us all with this kind of, I'm sure you've thought of this before, but it is entirely life imitating art, isn't it? This small group of people coming up with this ridiculous idea, and it's now going to the Fortune Theatre in the West End, which is, you know, that is the ultimate life imitating art, isn't it?
Yeah.
We talk about that quite a lot, don't we? Like, we didn't really realize at the time when we first fell in love with the story, but I think, yeah, it feels like we've pulled off our own crazy spy mission by infiltrating the West End, and we're just so grateful that the people, like the audiences and the people that have supported that have sort of made that possible, because it does feel ridiculous and it feels completely impossible. But again, it's been really joyful to see people go, yes, this could fly, this could go on. Like, we believe in these small stories, we believe in this little idea. And hopefully it's inspirational to other people who are making stuff, and other people who have small ideas that want to make something to fly and that seems ridiculous, that it can happen.
It can. And I look forward to seeing it. And thank you so much for joining me on Musical Talk. Is there anything else you want to add? Any more stories or thoughts or pleas or requests?
It's full of pleas.
I mean, we just love people to buy tickets.
Come watch the show.
So many tickets to sell, guys. We really need to prove ourselves.
Don't make this the most embarrassing moment of our lives.
They have a mission and they want to win. We'll leave it at that. Thank you so much to Felix, David, Tash and Zoe for coming on to Musical Talk to discuss Operation Mincemeat. You can find out more operationmincemeat.com, and previews start on the 29th of March, and then it goes from the 9th of May to the 8th of July, and I can't wait to come and see it. Thank you so much, and all the best of luck for the run.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Musical Talk. To find out more about the world of Musical Talk, you can visit our website at musicaltalk.co.uk, where you'll find all our episodes, or you can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. Please follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Musical Talk.